seems to be compelled to take a job with a corporation. It's very difficult indeed these days to run a small business where you're your own boss, because you have to employ an enormous staff of people to keep track of the paperwork. I know a person, for example, who has a farm where he raises avocados. And the Department of Commerce visited him with a stack of forms this thick, which he had to fill in. Well, he got tough and said, I haven't the faintest idea what to fill into these forms. And he said to the agent of the Department of Commerce, you fill them in. And he made that man sit down and go through the whole procedure of filling in these forms. Because he said, I don't have the time. I'm raising avocados. That's my business. And as to all this paperwork, to hell with it. And the same situation prevails not only in business, but also in the university and in the hospital. One of my favorite doctors told me the other day that he spends only 1/3 of his working hours practicing medicine. The rest is in recording, accounting, filling in reports. And it's the same in every hospital. Paperwork endlessly, because the record of what you did is more important than what you did. Write it down, and then it's real. And so, for the same reason, a lot of people don't believe they exist until they see their activities reported in the newspaper. A lot of juvenile delinquents commit crimes just to get attention. They'll get recorded. It's like you go to a party, you know, it's a picnic on the beach, and it's great fun. And somebody says, what a shame it is that nobody has a camera. Well now, I should talk, because at this moment we're recording what's going on, both on tape record and on TV. And remember that it takes as long to view it or to listen to it as it does to do it. Now, who's going to listen to all this? Over and over again.
Hey, how you doing?
So there's something fundamentally wrong here, and which the businessman, all people, needs to understand. What the businessman needs to know, equally, what the army officer needs to know himself. What do you really want? I have proposed that there be an entirely new kind of college entrance examination, in which instead of answering a lot of silly questions, you write for about 20 pages on your idea of paradise. It can be any kind of paradise you want. It can be very spiritual, it can be very sensuous. But spell it out. What do you want to happen in life? And then you will hand this thesis in to an assigned tutor in the faculty. And he'll read it over and examine you closely as to whether this is what you really want. Do you realize, for example, what goes with the things you say you desire? I mean, for example, you want to marry a certain kind of beautiful woman, and you specify in your paper the characteristics you should have. But, says the tutor, you said absolutely nothing about her mother. Because every girl goes with a mother. I mean, unless she's an orphan. And you must also specify what kind of mother-in-law you want. Well, then you haven't stopped to think about that. And that's just an illustration of going into detail, being very careful about what you desire, because it's a good saying, be careful. You make
Could have killed him.
Yeah. So this is the problem of thinking out. Be careful where it is that you want to go. Now let's take the war in Vietnam, which is supposed to be concluded. What on earth was it all about? If we had gone with military pomp and might into Vietnam with the express purpose of conquering the country and possessing it and carrying off the women into captivity, it would have been understandable. But as it was waged for some absolutely abstract end, namely the stoppage of an ideology called communism. Nobody knows what communism is, nor do we know what capitalism is. But we can fight endlessly on the supposition that there are good guys and bad guys. And when we fight on that supposition, there is no possibility of compromise or of gentleman's agreement, as there is honor among thieves. We're all thieves, let's face it. There is a doctrine in the Jewish tradition that when God created Adam, he put into him a spirit which is called the Yetzer Hara. And that means the wayward spirit, or what I call the element of irreducible rascality. And that is in us all. A little bit. It's not the whole of us. It's like just a pinch of salt in the stew. And you don't want the whole stew to be salt. But you have to have just a touch of rascality. And I find it difficult to get along with people who don't know that they have. People who come on that they're all sincere, all good, all pure, bore me to death and scare me. Because they're unconscious of themselves, therefore they suddenly do terrible things without warning, either to themselves or to others. They make promises that they're never going to fulfill because they want to talk right. And so, if I do business with someone who is not really aware that he's a rascal, I know he's impossible to do business with. He'll suddenly cheat me completely. But if I'm aware that he's a bit of a shyster, I feel comfortable. And I let him know that I am too. Then we're human. Then we can let our hair down. Then we can say, look, let's work this out. And we'll say, this is what I want. And I know what you want. And if we can get that clear, we can work out a reasonable agreement. We can compromise. We have a little play of give and take. But if you don't have that, you're absolutely snarled. Now look at it this way. You can't operate business nowadays without a whole team of lawyers. And what is the function of lawyers? They have to write down the rules of the game so that we have what is called the rule of law. A lot of people talk today about law and order and how it's got to be upheld. Now what does that actually mean? It means that all organizations, business corporations, bureaucratic government corporations, even churches, are going by the book. They are operating according to a manual. And in many corporations, individuals have constantly to consult some sort of manual to know what they should do, instead of using their own good sense. This doesn't work. It means that an organization is entirely different from an organism, which your nervous system facilitates, let's use that master word. And you don't know how you do it. You couldn't begin to describe how your nervous system works. Even neurologists don't know how. And yet it works reasonably well. Because your brain can handle an unknown number of variables. A variable is any identifiable process, such as breathing, such as the circulation of the blood, such as the secretions of the glands, such as the digestive system, and so on and so on. Now, you operate those all day without knowing how you do it. There's no book of rules according to which you do this. So in the same way, if a corporation is to be a true organism as distinct from an organization, it must be based on the principle of mutual trust and not on loyalty. Because if you can't trust other people, you cannot have a community, not even a corporation. It's risky, very risky to trust other people, because they may let you down. But on the whole, if you do trust them, the chances are perhaps 60 to 40, maybe a little more, maybe 75 to 25, that the system will work, simply because they're trusted. And as soon as you've got a system where, for example, in a supermarket, there are mirrors all over the place, TV cameras watching everything, all kinds of checks on the cashiers, that they won't sneak off with something. You've got a system that increasingly won't work. Because nobody will want to work there. One of the major reasons for hippies and dropouts is that human beings don't want to work under conditions like that. Because they are mechanical. And the mechanism is quite distinct from the organism. Because the mechanism is arranged on linear plans. The book, as the organism becomes sensible. You don't know how. That means you can't write down how, because it's more complicated than any form of writing. Now, the computer speeds up linear calculation to a terrific extent. But it still comes nowhere near the capacity of the human brain. And so this is something that has to be recognized as a principle. Now let me give another illustration. Every corporation employs a number of people in research. Let's take IBM. They have a huge center down near San Jose, where they have a research staff. And one of the first things they had to recognize is that you can't put creative research people under the clock. You've got to trust creative research people to fool around, to sit about, drink coffee and maybe whiskey, and scratch their heads and look at blackboards and play. And then suddenly, zingo, some interesting result will occur. But if you make them punch cards, and if you say these are the things that you've got to discover, it won't work. So the corporation has to make an act of faith in its research personnel. It has to say, we recognize you have an amazing gift called brains. We don't know what these are, but
Look
it
at that.
seems that in the past you've been
Broncos.
good. So we're going to employ you to do your thing, whatever that
Okay,
happens
saw
to be.
you're a Toyota. It's time to pull
And
over.
we'll make an act of faith. And invariably, if we make that act of faith, it may not even apply to
No.
you.
Broncos. 6-6.
Or there cannot be commerce, which really broken down means being
Consider a
merciful.
flex that whoever pulled over first time.
Cannot be
Yeah.
commerce without mutual trust.
And I pulled over and it's like, man.
Even insurance companies for mutual trust. But it just can't happen.
This four-wheel drive probably isn't
The
working.
society at the moment is mutual mistrust. And therefore it becomes increasingly difficult to do it. Business
I
is
don't know. People
inhibited
who own Jeeps or
by the
even
lack of
Fords
free enterprise.
are snobs.
Yeah, you are.
That sounds very right.
I don't see
But
too many people
actually,
driving
fascist
Broncos.
states, corporate
Yeah.
states,
Those are hits.
totalitarian states are utterly against free enterprise.
It's not a Ford, I ain't driving it.
So let's push this a little further.
Ford that comes with a 12 pack of Bud
Paul
Light.
said that the laborer is worthy of his hire. And I, as a philosopher, mere philosopher, dealing in higher things, always insist that I be paid for my work. And I get the highest fee I can get. And people say, well, you're just out for money. I say, that's none of your business. Because I give most of it away. My own needs being extremely simple. Although I enjoy good food, I don't even own a television. And, it's a very simple life. But I've got enough. And enough is as good as peace. You see, a lot of people don't feel happy unless they have another thing beyond money, which is called status. And status, to a very large extent in our economy, consists in conspicuous consumption. In having this thing, and that thing, and the other thing, and having a swimming pool, a Ferrari, a certain kind of clothes, and a certain kind of house with an enormous round-style picture window, and so on and so on and so on. And we think we need all that because we've been persuaded by a certain kind of propaganda that that's how we ought to live. Because we haven't asked ourselves whether that was what we really want. In other words, we've been propagandized into thinking what we wanted. I remember my daughter when she was in high school. Very sensitive.
One coming up behind us.
Insisted that she had to have a
Fast?
certain number of
Not super
Japanese
fast.
letters.
What is it?
It's our reason.
In those days, I couldn't afford them. I said, my dear, do you really want them? Or is it just that you've been reading ads in the magazine or listening to the other children? Because you see, schools are places where you send your child to be brought up by other children. Therefore, they get a kind of lowest common denominator of culture. They all think they've got to have this, they've got to have that. And they don't really want it. If they sat back and considered, do I need all that? Is this trip really necessary? They would come to the conclusion that no. And that would be very important, because they would save energy. You all know, of course, that we are nearing an energy crisis. That there is not enough physical energy going to be available. Go rushing around. So we need to take towards
Racing flags.
a more relaxed attitude.
Fight flag.
easiest way to get into the meditative state is to begin by listening. If you simply close your eyes
Yeah, I think so. I think it switched over to something else.
and allow yourself to hear all the sounds.
Yeah, just another
going on
meditating.
around
Yeah.
Cool.
I've already done that this morning.
you. You relinquish power. Trust others. You're more powerful. You do. But in such a way that instead of having to lie awake nights, controlling it, you do it beautifully by trusting the job to everyone else. They carry on. So you can go to sleep at night, trust your nervous system to wake you up in the morning. You can even tell it, I want to wake up at 6 o'clock, and it'll wake you up just like an alarm clock. This seems a sort of paradox to say this, but the principle of unity, of coming to a sense of oneness with the whole of the rest of the universe, is not to try to obtain power over the rest of the universe. That will only disturb it and antagonize it and make it seem less one with you than ever. The way to become one with the universe is to trust it as another, as you would another. Say, let's see what you're in doing that, you see, in saying that to everything else that you have been taught to think is not you, you are also saying it to yourself.
Well,
Because finally, as I pointed out, you do not know where your decisions come.
All
They
together.
pop up like hiccups.
yeah, I bought 2 sets.
And when you make a
My
decision,
front brakes.
people have a great deal of anxiety
Nice.
about making decisions. There's this guy farmer,
Flip back.
who ordered a help
The noisemaker.
man.
Oh. No.
And
I do.
found he was
I like throw 'em away after
extraordinarily
half.
efficient worker.
Half
The first day, he put him on sawing logs. And he sawed more logs than anybody had ever sawed. It was fantastic. But they were all done in one day. So the next day, he put him on to mending fences. And there were all kinds of broken fences around the farm. In one day. What am I going to do with this guy? So he took him down into a basement and said, look, here are all the potatoes that are coming from this harvest. And I want you to sort them into 3 groups. Those that we sell, those that we use for seeding, and those that we throw away. So he left him at that. At the end of the day, the laborer came back and said, well, that's enough, mister. I quit. He said, you can't quit. I've never had such an excellent brother. I'll raise your son. I'll do anything. Keep you around. All right, said no. All right, mending fences and chopping wood. But this potato business is decision after decision after decision after decision. So when we decide,
Yeah.
we're always worrying. Did I think this over long? Did I take enough data into consideration?
Classic.
And if you think it through, you find you never could take enough data into consideration. The data for a decision in any given situation is infinite. So what you do is, you go through the motions of thinking out what you will do about this. And then when the time comes to act, you make a snapshot. I mean, I'm speaking a little extremely, making some fun of it, and so on, because after all, we do occasionally get the vague outlines of things and make a right decision on rational grounds. But we fortunately forget the variables that could interfere with this coming out right. It's amazing how often it works. But warriors are people who think of all the variables beyond their control and what might happen. very little. But somehow or other, you are able to decide and control things more harmoniously. If you delegate authority. Why, very great businessmen are those who can delegate authority. Trust others to work for them. Because those are people developing businesses on the same basic structure that is fundamental to a living organism. Delegation of authority. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them. You see, then, what is happening is this. The more you let go, trust it, as if it were quite out of the blue. The more you realize the inseparable identity of self and other. Go back. If you try to find the identity of self and other by subjecting other to self, if, on the other hand, you find it through giving self, that is control, over to other, trusting that, you may make a mistake. You may make a bad gamble. But in the long run, you're acting on a principle which has the backing of evolution. This is the way biological evolution goes on. Constant delegation. Why, obviously, the democracy is superior to the monarchy. Mr. Tocqueville said that democracy is always right, but for the wrong reasons. Because there is operating in a democracy the principle that Buckminster Fuller calls synergy. And synergy is the intelligence of a highly complex system, the nature of which is always unknown to the individual members. That goes back again to this point, that we're always entering a new environment. We don't ever know fully what the new environment is, because the only environment we know the past ones. There is always then operating in the development of cellular life on any level a new way of organization, higher than any existing form. And we're not aware of it until after it's happened. If you ever saw, for example, the film Kon-Tiki, this man figured out a few things as to how to make a balsa wood raft sail from South America to the Pacific Islands. But once he had set this in motion, he discovered that all sorts of unexpected factors that when the wood got wet, it expanded, so that the ties bit into it and held it completely secure. He'd never expected that. And he found that as he sailed along, flying fish would simply a light flap on the deck every morning for breakfast. That all kinds of natural factors, because he'd touched a key where he was flowing with the course of nature. Everything cooperated. He made the act of faith. And he was just picking up, in other words, the practice which had been hundreds and hundreds of years ago, followed by others who worked it out by the great ecological awareness. So we do come out of this
it's like some kind of structure.
way of thinking
along, Balvin?
that it has become not virtuous,
It has been posted.
not self-sacrificing, not anything like that. It has become the hardest practical problem to let go control of others. Give up trying to dominate. Also, in a parallel way, it has become this kind of very much hard practical problem
Not one of them communicated.
Yeah.
to learn how to enjoy ourselves. You can go to the Protestant people with their Protestant ethic who are against it. Now say to them, with great nation, it is your prerogative to learn how to enjoy it. Why? Because in an age of leisure, people really don't know how to enjoy it. Because if they don't, they'll snatch the whole future of the human race. So a utopia has become not some sort of a dream, but an urgent necessity. We can't do without it. Because if we try to do without it, what's going to happen is that we are going to terminate our race in a mutual massacre of scapegoats. And so the present paranoia in the United States is going on, where everybody is thinking up a new scapegoat, how great it would be to demolish them, get them out of power. All this kind of bickering and right and left politics has become irrelevant. Because we now have the opportunity testing our own intelligence, our own technology. To take the risk of doing what we want, which will work to the extent
Someone
that we
else's
realize
phone drive's not working.
that what I want, basically, what I really want is what you want. And I don't know.
Tracy, you setting the battery? That didn't work for us.
But that gets you between I and God. So when I ask, I go right down to the question. Start. What do I want? The answer is I don't know. When Bodhidharma was asked, who are you? Which is another form of the same question. He said, I don't know. Planting flowers for which the butterflies come. Bodhidharma says, I know not. When you don't know what you want, you reach the state of desire. When you really don't know. You see, there's a beginning stage of not knowing, and there's an ending stage of not knowing. In the beginning stage, you don't know what you want because you haven't thought about it, or you've only thought superficially. Then when somebody forces you to think about it and go through and say, yeah, I think I like this, I think I like that, I think I like the other, there's the middle stage. Then you get beyond that. Say, is that what I really want? In the end you say, no, I don't think that's it. I might be satisfied with it for a while, and I wouldn't turn my nose up at it. But it's not really what I want. Why don't you really know what you want? Two reasons. Number one. Number two, you don't know yourself. Because you never can. The dark is never an object of its own knowledge. Just as a knife doesn't cut itself. Fire doesn't burn itself. Light doesn't illuminate itself.
Man
It's
again?
always an endless mystery to itself. I don't know. And this I don't know, uttered in the infinite interior
That's what I get.
spirit. This I don't know.
Sounds
It's
like
the
that's
same
the
thing
point.
as I love. I let go. Don't try to force or control. It's the same thing as humility. And so the Upanishads say, if you think that you understand the and yet be instructed. If you know that you do not understand, then what should it be? The Brahman is unknown to those who know it, known to those who know it. And the principle is that any time you, as it were, voluntarily let up control, in other words, cease to cling to yourself, you have an access to God. Because you're wasting energy all the time sacrifice, trying to manage, trying to enforce it. Once you stop doing that wasted energy is available. Therefore, you are, in that sense, that energy available. You are not mindful. You have the energy. When you're trying, however, to act as if you were God, that is to say, you don't trust anybody, you're the dictator with everybody, you lose the divine. Because what you're doing is simply defending. So then, the principle is, the more you give it away, the more it comes back. Now you say, I don't have the courage to give it away. I'm afraid. You can only overcome that barrier. You better give it away. There's no way of holding on. Meaning of the fact, you see, that everything is dissolving constantly, that we're all falling apart. We're all in a process of constant death. And that the world they hope men set their hearts upon turns ashes as possible as the light smell of how it is a planet. All falling apart. That's the great persistence. See, that fact that everything is in decay is your problem. That is allowing that you don't have to live. Because there's nothing. It's achieved for you. So once you see that it's all washed up, and that you will vanish and leave not a wreck behind, you really get with that. Suddenly you find enormous access. But it's not. You know what occasionally happens on the street. Two people are walking down the sidewalk straight at each other. They both decide to move to the right together, then to the left together, and they somehow get stuck. They can't pass each other. Zen teachers will pull just exactly that sort of stuff when going down a path and meet one of their students. See if they can get him in a tangle. Can he escape? And you will find in everyday life there is a very clear distinction between people who always seem to be self-possessed and people who are withering and nervous. And don't quite know how to react in any given situation, always getting embarrassed. Because they have their life too strongly programmed. You said, I mean, this is a common marriage argument. You said you would do such and such a thing at such and such a time. Now you've changed your plans. Not that they really, the change of plans really caused them inconvenience. Just the feeling that when you say you will do something at a certain time, you ought to do it at that time. Hell on my water. Well, that's being very ungentle. This is one of the great problems. This causes many automobiles. Many Russian heads beyond 5 years. They stay late with working